Hi, welcome to Keeping Guard. My name is Coleman Pratt, and I am really glad that you have joined me today. I've established Keeping Guard to help pastors and ministry leaders to care for their soul, their family, and their ministries. Under the Pastor's Corner here on my website, keepingguard.org, under the Pastor's Corners, I've been posting series of videos, what I'm calling Shaped by Encounter. 7 distinct times where God met me in an unusual way, in a personal way that really did change the trajectory of my life and of my ministry. I've shared previously things like shaped by surrender, shaped by disappointment, shaped by suffering, shaped by longing, or what I call the ache. This morning, I want to talk about shaped by confusion. And in sharing these video podcasts under the Pastor's Corner, my hope not only is that God may use something He has taught me in your life and in your ministry, but I also hope it encourages you to sit and think about times that God has encountered you and how that may have changed your life or your ministry, and write those down, those spiritual markers that are so important. Now today, what I'm going to be sharing is by far the most difficult one. I want to introduce you to somebody, if I might. Just bear with me for a moment. This is a picture of my daughter, Hannah Michelle Pratt. And there on the picture, you can see she was born in 1982. She died in 2006. And it says on there, the legacy of courage to live, to laugh, and to trust, which Hannah did. All of those very, very well. Hannah was born with a genetic disease some of you may be familiar with, called cystic fibrosis. She was diagnosed at about 6 or 8 weeks of age, and when she was diagnosed, the lifespan was about 12 or 13. Now, she lived to be 24, so she doubled that, but her whole life she dealt with battling with the ravages of cystic fibrosis. She had to go through daily treatment several times each day just to maintain any type of semblance of a normal life. When she was about the age of 20, Hannah's lungs had so deteriorated because of the disease, she had to go on a lung transplant list at the University of Florida Shands Hospital. She was on that transplant list for about 4 years. 15 months of that, she lived in transplant housing up at the University of Florida, 2 hours away from where we lived in Orlando. Well, in late August 2006, we got the call that there were a set of lungs that they felt were going to be a good match for Hannah, and that we had to immediately come to Gainesville so that she could go through that operation. Now, if you know anything about organ donation, you know that there is a limited time as the organs are being taken from the donor in order to be prepared for the recipient. And so you only have a certain amount of time, a limited amount of time in order to be there for that operation to take place. So we hurriedly got things together. It was a little bit chaotic. It was about 10 o'clock at night. But as we were walking out the door, literally walking out the door, my son said to me, "Daddy, I think we ought to take both cars." So I listened. I said, "Okay, let's take both cars." So Hannah and I got in one car. My wife and my son Jonathan got in the other, and off we went for the 2-hour drive to Gainesville. Now, that was when I was 53 years of age. I had been driving since I was 14, when I, of course, under a learner's permit. You know that I've only had one flat tire in my whole life. One flat tire while I was driving. And you guessed it. It was on the way to Gainesville for my daughter's double lung transplant surgery, under the time frame and the time pressure that we were facing. Had we only taken one car, Hannah would no longer have been a candidate because we would not have gotten there in time. But when the tire blew, we pulled off to the side of the road. We put Hannah in the car with my wife, and off they went. My son stayed and helped me change the tire. The next morning, early morning, about 5:30 or 6 in the morning, Hannah received the lungs. She went through the surgery to receive the lungs. Hannah only lasted 44 days after the surgery. Obviously, most of those days were very, very difficult. We knew from the training that we were receiving from the doctors and the staff at the University of Florida Shands Hospital, we knew that there were going to be physical challenges if the transplant was successful, as there are in any type of transplant surgery. But we were just hoping for a little while, just a few years, where Hannah could be free a little bit from the ravages of the disease of cystic fibrosis, where she could lead a more normal life. She'd be able to go out with her friends without having a 2-hour regimen of having to get ready and do all of the treatments that she had to do. And during those 44 days, while Hannah struggled mightily, and we as her family struggled right along with her, as we were struggling to hold on to hope, I had a number of people, especially one in particular, say to me, "Coleman, come on, man, where is your faith? You don't think God would answer all of those little prayers, like you taking a second car, just to let Hannah die now? Come on, man, hold on." And so I would kind of berate myself and say, "Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm sorry, yeah," and I'd screw up my faith and screw up my courage. But do you want to know something? That's exactly what happened. Because on October 13th, 2006, my daughter, Hannah Michelle Pratt, died. And in the days and the weeks following, I struggled mightily. And the thing that I guess I struggled with the most is this idea of just being confused. Why? I would ask myself, why would God answer all of these smaller prayers, like the taking of the second car and others that I don't have time to go into? Why would God answer all of these smaller prayers just to say no to the larger prayer that Hannah might survive the surgery and have some days, months, years of some sort of normal life? Why would he say no to that and say yes to all these others? Well, in the midst of my struggle, one day I picked up the phone and I called a good friend who had invited me just to call him if I was ever struggling. His name is Larry Crabb. He's an author and a speaker and someone that God has used in many people's lives. And he was a good friend of mine. He's with the Lord now. And I can remember calling Larry and just expressing to him my confusion and yes, even my anger. And I just didn't understand things. And Larry listened patiently and with grace. And at some point during that conversation, Larry said something to me that shifted things for me, not just in my life and in my suffering and my grief in the aftermath of Hannah's death, but shifted things for me and how I would deal with people in my ministry. And this is what Larry said. He said, "Coleman, I don't think real spiritual maturity is possible until you encounter the God who appears to be insane." End quote. Now, the operative word there obviously is appears. I mean, God is not insane. Larry was not saying that, and I'm certainly not saying that on this video. But what he was saying is that there are going to be times in our life where the ways of God in our lives are going to appear on the surface from our earthbound perspective as simply crazy, as insanity. Now, when Larry said that, something shifted inside. And I was able to release the demand that what I was going through somehow makes sense. I still didn't understand. I still don't understand to this day. But I began to be able to live with the confusion without the insistence or the demand that God somehow explain himself or make sense to me. Think about all of the many stories that we love in the Bible. The stories that we love to read, the stories that we love to preach and teach, the stories that we love to read to our children. In many of those stories, there is this component. Think of what it must have been like to be Noah. And for God to ask him to build a boat in the middle of a desert when arguably many people believe there had even been no rain up to that point. That appears to be crazy. And what if you were Abraham and God comes to you and says, I want you to take the one son of the child of promise, the son that I gave you that is to be a blessing to all the world. I want you to take him and take him up on top of the mountain that I will show you. And I want you to sacrifice him there. I want you to kill him there. That must have appeared to Abraham as insane. And then there's Moses, who at age 40 appears to be confident that he has what it takes to set Israel free from their bondage in Egypt. But I wonder what it must have felt like at age 80, after 40 years on the backside of a desert keeping sheep for his father-in-law, when God comes to him and says, now's the time and you are the one. That must have appeared nuts to Moses. And then I think of Gideon, who's facing a Midianite army that's vast in number. And God says to this military leader, or what would be a military leader, you got too many soldiers with you. I want you to reduce their number. And so Gideon reduces their number, and God says there's still too many. And then reduces them again until he's left with 300 people. I mean, who tells a military leader you got too many fighting men for battle? And then we have in the New Testament the life and the teachings of Jesus as he invites us into this upside down kingdom where sometimes things appear to be crazy. You got to die if you want to live. You got to be last if you want to be first. If you want to be great, you've got to be a servant of all. If you want to be first, you've got to be a slave. Wow, those appear to be crazy. And then what do we know that God tells us in Isaiah 55? He says that my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so are my thoughts above your thoughts and my ways above your ways. Isaiah 55. Those thoughts and those ways, when they begin to come across our life, and they will, and they come across our ministry, and they will, there are going to be times, ministry leader, where you're going to say to yourself, this is crazy. This makes no sense at all. And let me tell you how that changed my ministry. A lot of times when people come to us as their pastor, as their ministry leader, they come to us with situations that stubbornly resist any type of solution or any type of fix-it mentality. Things that we encounter that we can't explain and we don't even understand. And a lot of times when they come to us with that kind of expectations. Would you explain this to me? This doesn't make sense. Can you fix this? What's the solution here? And if we're not careful as ministry leaders, we can give in to the pull and feel like that our job is to solve those problems that are unsolvable, to fix that which cannot be fixed, to give answers where answers really are in short supply or in fact there are none. And so I begin to recognize that my role as a shepherd, my role as God's under shepherd, if you will, my role as God's servant to his people was oftentimes not so much to explain or even to help them to understand, but instead help them to accept and to help them to trust in the midst of great confusion and pain and sorrow, to help them in that moment to recognize that while they could not understand, they still could make the choice to trust a God who at times may appear insane. That his heart was still good, and that the good work that he had started in them, in bringing them to himself and conforming them to the image of Christ, he was going to complete. And sometimes that meant them walking through circumstances and situations that were way beyond their understanding. And as I began to recognize that and take that approach, both in my own life personally, the situation with my daughter Hannah and others that would follow, and I began to take that approach with others that came to me with situations that I knew were way beyond both of us, I began to find a freedom and a joy. And I began to find a purpose that I feel like is in keeping with the heart and the character of God in what he is doing in the lives of his people. So for you and for the people that you minister to, can I remind us all again, real spiritual maturity is impossible until we encounter the God who appears to be insane. Maybe that's what's happening in your life right now, ministry leader. Or maybe that's what's happening in your ministry and somebody that has come to you. I encourage you to encourage them that while they may not understand, that the steadfast love of God does in fact endure forever, that his heart is good beyond our wildest imagination, and that he can be trusted even in situations that are far beyond our understanding. I hope today that this video finds your soul resting in God's grace, his goodness, and his steadfast love. I hope that your family and your ministry are doing well. But I hope most of all that you're encountering the God who, while he doesn't all the time explain himself, is present, is good, and is always at work in our lives. Ministry leader, thank you so much for joining me, Pastor. Reach out to me on my website, keepingguard.org. Shoot me an email. Let me know how I can be praying for you. And if you want to have further conversations, reach out to me. I'd love to have the opportunity to connect. Thanks so much. I'm praying for you. God bless you. Bye-bye.